Okay, so I thought what I might try this time is try to do audio over the top of the video that I took. Then maybe I'll figure out how to splice it in and pause it and stuff like that. So it's a little more of an activity for me than anything else, but it'll allow me to kind of talk about what's going on in the trip a little bit and seeing it so that I don't leave everything out. Some stuff I forgot though. We realized that neither of us had the space blankets, which, if you're going camping in the winter, you should always have those space blankets. We did not have that, so that was like a glaring hole um, in the gear. So even if you don't think you'll need it, I'll never need this or whatever, you should always have the space blanket because we're several miles from the car, and the car is on a long road, and that's in the middle, of nowhere in the snow, and no space blanket. So as soon as I finish my introductory here on the video, I'll try and talk fast enough and keep everything going for what's going on in here. I didn't realize how long I did the opening thing on this. The other thing I think that I could probably use is a small, like tight pair of gloves, like mechanic gloves, because my big gloves were too big for me to do any work in. And then when anything I was doing that involved grabbing the wet stuff, like my hands got really cold, then I had to stop and try to get them warm and dry and put them back in the gloves and wait so I could work again. So having a tight fitting pair of gloves, not necessarily to fit inside the big gloves, but in addition to those, would probably work. Okay, here the video starts. I don't know why I took a video of these. The airport, man, Denver airport is long. It had a whole, between every terminals. And I landed in Washington, and then he picked me up and we drove to Montana. This is the road entry. There was a lot of curves and stuff on this. I should have got better footage of that, but it kind of felt weird sitting in the car with somebody holding the camera up. But the road was neat. Like, look at all those trees. The big cedar trees out here were just awesome. There's your bear warnings. Of course, they're hibernating now. It's John checking out the side of the road. That's the trail we were on. We didn't see the numbers anywhere else. A little bit of shit there on the ground. That's always good. That is Irish Death, a stout that I took out there with me. Yeah, you can hear in the video without the music on this, me just panting already walking through here. The elevation hit me, but so did the incline stuff. And some blurry pictures, man. Some of them are really good though. So what happens is I'm going up this trail, and just as soon as I started walking, I started out with my coat on because it was cool, and then started walking and just sweating my ass. Those creeks were so awesome. They were great. And then, yeah, I would have camped by one of those creeks on the way up. So yeah, my coat started getting wet inside. So I took the coat off. They're hunting. This is a hunting group. They rode the horses out there, which is great because, it's a good way to travel and bring your meat back, but they didn't catch anything. Stop and talk to them for a minute. Oh yeah, the creeks, the way they're running and the ice down the sides of them and stuff, and you could hear water the whole trail. Like, it was really cool. Anyway, my coat got wet, so I took my arms out of it and left it through the straps. I don't know what that stuff is, but if it was dry, I bet it's a good fire starter. That's why. There was laying everywhere, too. So then my coat was between me and my bag and just got soaked. Look at that rock slide up there. That is cool, that tree growing out of that rock like that. Man, the scenery out there was great. So yeah, as I'm sweating going up this trail, like, my coat gets soaked. My clothes get completely soaked, and that was part of the problem. And it was like... It's 2,700 feet of elevation in a 7-mile trip. Like, it's a steady up. And it was super hard for me. Yeah, so my clothes were... So I brought 2 extra shirts because I know how much I sweat. Oh, that waterfall. That was one of the best parts of this whole thing. Yeah, it was fucking great. I wanted to go down by it, but on the way back, like, I just wanted to get out of there then, So yeah, I brought the extra shirts, and I did have my thermals put away with wool socks because in case I needed them when I got to camp. It turns out I did. So what happens was when I get to camp, that's awesome with the light coming over the side of that. We're all up higher than the fog even, or the mist. you get to camp and it started snowing as soon as we got to camp. And I put my coat on and it was beating off. It was kind of like sleet. It was beating off of my coat. But I'm wet. So now I'm getting the inside of my coat wet. And my hands were so cold that I had lost like all the dexterity and I couldn't even get the prusik knots through the toggle spots on my tarp. And like I've been in some really intense situations, you know, I've even had 3-round fights and stuff, and I never thought that my mind would just shut off like that. So I'm just totally zoned on putting this tarp up, and John comes up and is like, "Hey, you got to put your rain gear on, man. You're getting wet." Yeah, that fire was so hard to start. That's why we didn't get any footage of it. Like we ended up using a match, but we found dry enough shavings to get the fire started. It took a long time. And then we were just stacking the wet sticks up on top of it. But yeah, John's like, "You got to put this on." And then I realized what had happened. And like, I gave no fucks. I put the tarp up backwards to the way I wanted to set it up too. But the wind was whipping back and forth, so it didn't matter. So that's why it was so low to the ground, which caused more problems. But I didn't care. I left my stuff outside and everything. I just got in the tent. And in the beginning, I was laying on my sleeping pad, covered up with my wet coat, still wearing my wet clothes. And I was sitting there shivering. And John had put my bag under the tarp and everything because he kind of knew what was going on. But my brain just quit. So I know that next time, and I'll know to pay attention. But yeah, those boots that I wore were awesome. Like I stepped down in that. In several creeks I stepped in and my boots were not wet. And they weren't too warm with the wool socks on either. My feet didn't really get cold. Yeah, they were great boots. But yeah, I get inside the tarp and then when I was like, fuck man, I gotta change. So I changed into my thermals. So I was like, what are you doing? And then I'm laying under there and it's like 6 o'clock and it's just raining by then. It just rained all night. So the tarp was getting water inside. So I reached out and felt the sleeping bag and it was wet outside and I could see water on the inside of the tarp. Now I'm gonna fucking die out here. But it stayed toasty. John came to check on me when it got wet. And you see I burnt my pants in the video. So I told him it was getting wet, but I didn't think it was that big a deal. And like I said, we didn't have space blankets and he was like, well, at worst case scenario, we can hike out. But it was dark when he said that. So as far as I'd ever known, like that's not what you do because I don't want to be in the, you know, we don't know the trail that well. It was snowing. It was a hard trail. Like I figured if we tried to hike out, it'd be the worst thing possible. So I was jesting with him then. I told him, you know, man, I thought you were going to offer to cuddle. He said we could do that too, but yeah, that big Agnes bag's probably what saved me from getting any kind of exposure or anything. I had things going through my head in case it started getting wet on the inside or cold of the sleeping bag. So there were things like I thought maybe I could wear my rain gear inside the sleeping bag and it would still then be warm enough if it came to that. And then, of course, I sweat. I get so hot when I exercise at all. You know, it could be a long night, but I mean, just keeping warm by moving until we couldn't get a fire started because it was still raining. Everything was soaking wet. We had found dry because I knew we were going to have a problem with the fire. So we found dry sticks. We were checking everything and finally found some sticks with some snap in it. But by the time we tried starting a fire after the shelters were set up, it was all wet too. And there was one stick of dead standing that I knew would be dry, but we needed it for in the morning, so I left it there. But I could have got into that as well. So you know, I was still just determined. So my daughter asked me questions about how I deal with situations like that, like a fear, like bears or the weather or anything, because she'll get afraid sometimes in ways that will restrict her, like she won't go out and enjoy stuff, like the camping things. And she asked me how the mindset works with that. And it's pretty much like, I know the risks involved, like with bear camping. So, you know, you don't cook at your camp. You keep your food separate. You hang it. You know, you don't try to be super quiet. If you see a bear, you've seen it on a loan. Hey bear. So there's things that you do. So I'm going to do my best with the information that I have. And then when it comes to it, like, well, what happens if, you know, the bear comes or whatever, or you know, see wildcat? I was like, well, I'm going to do everything in my power to make it out. You know, I'm not a quitter. And I know what it's like to push and have to get through, because, you know, the long fights that I've had and stuff, 3-round fights and training and stuff like that. And so I know I'm not gonna panic, because I don't give up like that. Like, I fight hard, and that's what I'm gonna do. And then in the end, like, if I lose or I don't make it, like, it's not my problem anymore. Like, I'll never know it. So I don't panic and give up. As a mindset's the thing. Like, you always keep pushing. So I had that same mentality in the winter. I knew the risks. I went with someone so I'd be safe. And so he recommended that we go back in after that first thing. He said part of your gear's wet and it wouldn't be safe. So, you know, let's go back in. And I probably would have stayed another night out. So I'm glad. And I deferred to him, because he does know better than I do, because he winter camps often. And the things like, hey, get your rain gear, and he grabbed some of my stuff and threw it under the tarp, so it wasn't good, or it wasn't bad as it could have been. So yeah, it was really surprising to me, like, how much dexterity my fingers lost, and also I got zoned and I didn't realize it. Like, I was standing there wet and fucking with that tarp for way too long, because I was like, my actions, like, I was still deliberately doing stuff, but it wasn't like as fast or as intentional as I would normally do it. Like, the cold really fucked with me, and part of it was because I didn't realize it was happening. So in the future, I'll be able to do better with that. The other thing that I realized is, in case something like that happens, like, it got cold fast when that snow came. It came up on us. So one thing I realized is I don't want to use the tarp in winter camping unless maybe I have my dog. But the reason for that isn't because I think the tarp is flawed. The reason for that is because of what happened when I was trying to set it up. So unless you have a system, like some of the bushcraft guys you see have a system where they just kind of pull stuff out. Like, if you're really good at setting that thing up, then, and you could do it quickly, that's fine. But yeah, because like I couldn't use my fingers, and my mind was, if I would have set that up faster, we may have got a fire started even. And so the new gear that I got, I want to do a different video on it, so I'll get it out. It's the tent that John was using when we went. It's 2 poles, and it goes up super easy. It's not a winter tent exactly, but, you know, neither is the tarp. And really, like, what I took with me was what I was counting on to keep me warm, not the shelter, and not necessarily the clothes. Like, that pad and bag could have kept me warm naked out there. And if it wasn't raining, I wouldn't even had to been in a shelter, and it still would have done it. So getting that shelter put up quickly, it doesn't matter if it's a winter tent or not. Just having the shelter, the rain is what did it. So I bought that tent because he's getting into mountaineering, so he wants to upgrade, and he doesn't like to have extra stuff kind of laying around. So I got that tent. So that's one thing I would suggest. The other thing is, whether you need it or not, have a spare set of clothes, because I didn't, and then, you know, I know for myself, I have to have a plan for when I get wet, because if it's any kind of, even if when I do camp chores, I sweat. I was sweating in the morning. Like John said, he was surprised at how much I sweat. And I try to tell everyone that, but unless you've worked out with me before, you don't really know what I'm talking about. Like, I drip fucking sweat. I've only seen like 2 other people ever sweat as much as I do. So I need extra clothes. And I knew that with the shirts, so I brought the shirts. And the other thing is, like, my pants ripped out, so that would have been a weird hike out. Hiking out in my thermal underwear. I mean, I'll do it and I don't give a shit, but it's more than it needs to be. So, you know, if you got the room, it's worth taking the clothes. And the other thing is, a lot of people recommended that I get a liner and outer gloves, like wool liner and gloves, and I went with the gloves that I bought, the Osaki, yeah, and they were good, but I didn't have that thin pair, and if I had that thin pair, my fingers probably wouldn't have got cold when I was trying to tie the knots and stuff. Yeah, and then we got the stuff dried by the fire and everything, so that worked. But yeah, on the way out, I strapped my coat to my bag, which is what I should have done anyway. I wasn't very aware when I put the coat between me and the bag, and that was just a stupid mistake. When you make mistakes in the weather like that, like it's serious mistakes. Like that coat was a very valuable tool, and I wasted it because I wasn't thinking, because of my lack of experience, really. And John hadn't said anything because he didn't realize how much I was going to be sweating all over it. Yeah. So that, and then the fire. What we ended up doing, there's a feather stick method, and we didn't do that. And one of the reasons I didn't try that method is because I can't get the feathers to stay on the stick, and for some reason I thought that was important. So what we ended up doing was shaving out small pieces of wood as if it were a feather stick, but just cutting them all the way off. And some of them, a lot of them were a lot shorter, some of them, varying lengths, but we just shaved that stuff down. And then we couldn't get it to catch with a spark. And actually, I even tried my char cloth and a little bit of cotton, and it was partially wet. And then we ended up using the matches. Like I had stormproof matches, and John had a box of matches. And that ended up getting it started. But I mean, it took time. Like, it wasn't something we got one started and it went out even because all the wood was wet. So then we had to start over and find more shavings and stuff. And once we got it going, it was important to keep wood near it, stack wood across the top of it, not necessarily burning, but get it over where the heat is drying it out. Because if you get behind it all on getting the wet wood dried in the fire, your fire's going to go out. Which we had an alternate cooking source, so we had butane on the burner to make food with, but I mean, still fire's important. So that was a great experience, like urgently needing a fire, everything being wet. This is the second time I've been in a situation where everything was wet and we had to start a fire, which I didn't think you could do until I talked to the bushcraft group. I was like, well, how do you do that? And Jimmy, the guy who made the group, he's like, you just get in, that wood's dry in there somewhere, even if it's down to a toothpick. Like, what else are you doing? By the time you get the toothpicks out enough to start the fire, you're going to have processed a whole bunch of wood to get dry and whatnot. So that's good. The other thing that I did was I didn't pay attention to the fact that the rocks that I was laying my pants on to dry were gonna melt it, and I didn't know it was that pants just crumbled. It kind of melted in, and I went to see if it would pull apart, and it was like papery, and it just crumbled. And so I could have actually lost my pants, which probably wouldn't have been good in the snow. But everything else I was happy with. Like the cooking stuff did good. That Big Agnes, man, I am a believer now. It doesn't seem very thick. It doesn't seem like much, but it was dry and warm. And I never really believed when they were talking about, you get wool because it can still insulate you when it's wet, and the synthetic stuff can get wet where down can't. So not only did I not believe that something could insulate you when it was wet, I never thought that I could be warm in winter weather like that. And that sleeping bag, not only was it warm enough for that weather, but it was warm even when it was getting wet from the tarp. So that was awesome. I love that bag. And yeah, I brought it plenty of food, but like I said, my mind was once I got in the sleeping bag too, it was even worse. Like John said he could bring over hot water so I could make one of the mountain houses, and I said I wasn't getting out of the sleeping bag. And then in the morning, like it was so hard to get up in the morning. Partially because my pants and boots were down in the corner of the tent and I knew it was wet. And I'd have to crawl into the wet tent or tarp to get it. And it was cold out, and I didn't get up until I was going to pee myself, really. And John came over and asked how I was doing, and I said, I'm not getting out. We live here now. But overall, like it was interesting to see that that sleeping bag did so well. It was really cool getting the fire started in the wet like that. The scenery was amazing, but the hike was like, I would have done 2 days on that hike out and then 1 day back, and it didn't take us very long at all to get back. But I would have camped by one of those creeks, and then I would have finished the trip the next day. and then came back. And it ended up, we only spent one day camping, and then we spent the next night at John's house. We ate Five Guys and watched Cinema Sins. If you haven't watched Cinema Sins, it's on YouTube. Check him out. It's pretty funny. He takes any movie at all and just beats it up. And anytime he says something, bad about it, he'll go ding, and that's the sin counter. So check out, find your favorite movie and see if Cinema Sins has done something on it. Like, it's pretty funny. It's good stuff. So we still had a jolly good time. I got to go. I'd never been to that cluster of states. Was some of the last ones in America that I haven't been to. I think Oregon and Alaska is all it is now, because I had Washington, Idaho, and Montana in that cluster of states I hadn't been to, and I stayed a couple days with John in Washington and flew into there, and then we camped in Montana. And the plan was the second day to camp in Idaho, because we had to drive all the way through the top part of Idaho to get there. But we had to call it short. That's the other thing. There's no sense in turning a fun camping trip into a survival situation. So if I would have pushed back at all, I think John, I'm a grown-ass man. John would have let me do my thing, and he was going to be fine, because he had all his dry stuff. And just realizing, like, it's okay to call it short. I spent money to go out there. I took time off work. It's supposed to be epic, and it was epic. And one thing that could have made that regrettable instead of epic was me getting upset about that. It's not worth being in a survival situation. Like, I'm going out several times to get experience at this winter camping, and experience is hard to come by in this case, because the weather is harsh and mistakes can kill you. So I just deferred to him. It didn't matter to me. It didn't ruin my trip. Still had a good time. I could have let it ruin my trip, though. And so between that and the determination, like I explained to my daughter, like, that's the kind of stuff they mean when they say the most important thing you have in a survival situation is your mindset. So I still had a lot of fun. I got because I was paying attention, got to realize some new experience, like that fire starting thing. For some reason, I just thought it wouldn't work if you didn't do it the way. And then, like, knowing to call it, knowing my mistakes, was looking for the mistakes I made, and just having fun. Like, you can still have fun if it doesn't work out the way you thought. We didn't even know for sure where we were going when we went out there. So yeah, I guess that's my experiences. I don't think I missed anything. If you have any other questions, go ahead and ask them, and I'll address them in the comments and stuff. But it was a fun trip. I'll do another video for my tent that I bought. I'm very happy that I have the tent. It also means I don't have to carry the bug net. I'll still carry the tarp, probably, in case I go camping with a dog, so I don't think he'll be very chill being outside without being able to see me and stuff. But it's got a screen already, so that's the built-in bug net, and it's easy to set up and stuff. So I don't know. We'll try it out, see what it's like. The reason I got it is mainly for winter, so if I go another winter camping, I'll probably have both my tarp and that new tent. That way I have options. But okay, that's it. So gear videos coming up. I also am ordering a hammock. So that should be here this week. That's not for me. That's for Mel. So there we go. So here's the experiences video. Let me know what you guys think.